Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. As always, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical, and we are back for the new year after a couple of false starts. I appreciate everybody who's able to join us today, especially my guests, Renee Johnston from Black Liberation Media's Saturdays with Renee, and Jamarr Jabari from Jabarivoc Media here on YouTube. We're hoping to have a good conversation today about ICE, why it should be abolished, and why it exists in the first place. Just as some history for people who are younger than myself, I will note that ICE is only 25 years old. ICE is younger than most Zoomers. ICE is a Zoomer. So when we talk about how if abolishing ICE is so dramatic, we have to remember that ICE was created in the Patriot Act along with the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. It's only been around since 2002, so less than 25 years old, 24 years old. That's just something to think about when people say, well, we can't abolish it, we need it. It's only even existed for 24 years. What do you think about that, Renee?
I almost forgot that it was 2002.
Right?
So, I mean, it's par for the course in this place. You know what I'm saying? Like we'll just create things to cause chaos and to make money for the people who don't need to make any more money. Like at the core of it.
Yeah, that's where
that's
it comes
really what
down.
It's all about. Right. That's what it comes down to. It's it's way more simple, I think, than most people wanna admit to. In the end, how do we make more money? How do we make more money by oppressing the people who already don't have money? And whatever the answer to that question is what the next step is.
And what's so funny about that, as far as the making money part of it, is, of course, the Patriot Act, when it passed and created ICE, was a response to 9/11. However, they had tried to pass it when Bill Clinton was president. It was originally Joe Biden's Comprehensive Counterterrorism Act.
Right.
They couldn't get enough support from either Democrats or Republicans to pass this massive reconcentration of federal power. That was the biggest deal since the National Security Act under Truman. So when we think about the war on terror, we need to remember that the war on terror spawned its own new national security complex in the same way that the Cold War spawned its new national security complex. And at the same time, we were declaring the same time we were creating ICE, we were declaring drug dealers in Latin America to be terrorists in order to let the DEA and ICE just find them in the U.S. and kill them, which is something we don't talk about a lot anymore. And I think Jamarr might have some things to say as how this ties into what's going on in Venezuela right now.
Well, yeah. This is the most easiest way they could do things because our media and our society, unfortunately, there is this popularity that drugs is a common thing where only Black and brown people sell, and they only have the millions of dollars because of it. You know what I'm saying? So of course, people will automatically believe that someone like Nicolas Maduro will be the largest drug trafficker in Latin America, when the data shows the exact opposite. And in fact, after they already apprehended him, kidnapped him from Venezuela, the DOJ backpedaled on the existence of the Venezuelan cartel within that same week, which is absolutely insane. The first report I saw was from TRT.com.
They went further than that. They admitted that the cartel of the sun, the one that supposedly Maduro ran and was our whole excuse for invading, they admitted that the cartel of the sun was a CIA operation to overthrow Chavez.
Yep, and Chavez had a speech about that in 2005 that I post on my page as well too. That Alex Suarez showed me.
And then when you look at this, that we are destroying countries in Latin America with bullshit lies, and that we're responsible for most of the drug dealing we're blaming on Latin American countries, then ICE becomes this sick joke. And it's only natural that when we're doing all this stuff in Latin America and we're using ICE to kill people in the US, it's only natural that the guy who trains ICE to do what they're supposed to do would step in front of the car and shoot a woman in the face at a protest, because they've been doing that to the people that they want to arrest since 2014. That came out too, Renee, is the Obama administration's ICE was stepping in front of cars to shoot people in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the situation is none of this is new, right? And I think the thing that probably disturbs me the most is this reaction as if like this is all brand new. All that's brand new is it's more in your face than it had been. that's the brand new thing, right? And I think people have to make these adjustments to realizing that we live in a place where this is par for the course. So when I hear people say things like, this is not our America, one, I want to scream because America's not a place. And then two, I want to say, actually, it is. It is, and it always has been. And I need people to just understand that the minute you start following the money, all of this starts to make more sense. And it's interesting, you were talking about FBI and CIA actions in South America and Central America. And I learned, and I wish I could remember what conversation was that I was taking part in, about how they were, it was Lawrence from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle out of Baltimore, whose father is ex-Baltimore police officer who was sent because they used to send police officers down into South and Central America because they weren't allowed to send the military. I mean, when you start tracking the history of these things and understanding how embedded we are, it's amazing. And whenever people start talking about, the drugs, I just finished maybe a month ago the Fort Bragg cartel book. And if anybody wants to understand anything about what's really happening with trafficking, you need to read that book because it's all the government.
There's something else that's worth noting too, in that just a few years ago now, the head of the Oakland Police Union was busted for running a fentanyl ring.
Jesus Christ.
Now, we have our leaders complaining about how the drugs come from South America.
Right.
And I'll be up on this high horse till the end of time, when meth and fentanyl, which are the two biggest consumer drugs on the market right now, are made by a guy in a trailer park with ingredients he gets from a pharmacy and an auto parts store.
Jesus.
As the line goes, I know people hate The West Wing, but this is really one of the funniest lines in television. In the episode of The West Wing, the DEA agent is explaining to the president, and the DEA agent, by the way, is played by Clark Gregg, who went on to play Phil Coulson in The Avengers, which just shows you where these actors come from. We complain about some of these shows like The West Wing, and yet the best actors on TV and the movies have gone through this mill learning these snappy one-liners. But anyway, the DEA agent says, "Oh yeah, they just make meth out of tractor starter fluid in cold medicine." And the president, like, tractor starter fluid doesn't kill you? And the DA says, "Oh yeah, it'll kill you, but it makes you really high first."
That's just very disturbing. And this is why it's important that, on the flip side, that we do support that all drugs should be legalized so people can have safer choices and being able to use by their choice, not because they're told not to, and know exactly what's going into their body, because those are horror stories. And the fentanyl, you know, this is something that, like you said, is all because of how the U.S. has dealt with being a part of the complicity of the war on drugs. So what everything that we are seeing right now is just a calamity of what we have caused with our tax dollars unknowingly, and this is what they were doing, and now we have to deal with the backlash. And now they have ICE, the DHS, with them being able to cover their faces is a bipartisan bill that was passed. The only reason why they're able to do that, the only reason why they're the most funded organization in the country right now, they got more money than the FBI, is because of the bipartisanship. It's the system itself. So we have to keep having conversations like this to tell everyone, so people can be well aware of what's going on, and combat it, and force accountability. But they are very, very good at the crime part of it and keeping people in fearful. So it's very difficult to have these conversations. But some people are listening. Most people are listening, but not enough.
I mean, I've been robbed twice. I say robbed, but it wasn't really robbed in either sense. I had a car stolen once, and I had some jewelry I had bought for my wife stolen by a pawnbroker. Now, in both of these cases, the cops were no help. It was the insurance company that made me whole when my car was stolen, and the cops took the pawnbroker's side. So if the point is that we need the cops to stop someone from stealing from us, why do the cops side with the thieves, Renee?
Because the thieves all own the building. So there's no interest in making sure that you're made whole. The interest is making sure that the people who own the buildings are able to continue to own the buildings. It's the unfortunate reality of all these things. And I was telling you before we got started, I fell down a rabbit hole this morning because although I refuse to pay for the majority of these mainstream papers, I get all the newsletters, right? Which is intentional, because then I can see the headlines, see what they're talking about. And if it's something that I think is useful, then I can try and poke around and see what information I can find.
True.
And the New York Times released an article about how many people are actually being detained, deported, arrested. And this has been a long-standing thing for me because, people go back to brunch when the Democrats are in power, and they completely ignore the reality of the situation for things that are happening, and no one pays attention to the actual numbers. And so I, for a long time, have been of the belief that this current administration, although, yes, things are utterly out of control, and yes, it does feel a lot worse for people who are on the ground and on the street. And it definitely feels more frightening for people who are in the position in which they could, or their family members could possibly be detained. The reality is the numbers are not actually different, right? The numbers are not different. The numbers actually are less than they were during Obama. They're still less, even though he's doing his best to go through. And what it appears to me is happening, and it'll take me a few more days probably to really dig out to see if I can find full numbers to confirm it, is this is really all about padding the numbers for the private prison industrial complex, which lost its funding when Biden decided that they weren't going to use private prisons anymore for federal detentions. And so now all of a sudden we have quotas, 3,000 people a day. We're reopening private prisons that have been closed over the past few years, and the goal is to have 100,000 beds. And they don't really care who's in those 100,000 beds as long as there are people in them, and they'll just keep rotating people in and out. And at this moment, it's easier to point to the immigrants.
It's worth noting that even though Biden stopped using private prisons for federal prisoners, the Biden administration never stopped using private prison contractors to run immigration jails. That's one of the reasons that when Trump took power, they actually had to release people
Right.
from immigration detention when Trump first took power, because the system, the public and private, was so clogged that they didn't have bed space for new prisoners. That's why crap like Alligator Alley and sending people to other countries became such a big deal to Trump, because we didn't have the prison space.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm just very quickly, since you mentioned the Alligator Alley, what I discovered this morning, which I thought is very interesting, is Alligator Alley has nothing to do with the federal government, which I hadn't been paying that much attention to. It is a fully funded state-run organization via some weird policy that they put in place that allows states to build their own prisons in order to incarcerate immigrants.
Florida built it.
Crazy.
DeSantis built it for Trump and was running it for Trump, and this is the loophole that the federal government was hiding behind when they say, "Well, we don't know what happened to people."
Yep, exactly.
And I also like to think that contributing to the numbers not being as high as it was during Obama, because Obama was about 3 million, right? I think the education that people have now on ICE is what's helping with knowing your rights, knowing they can't come in without a warrant until, they figure out a way how to get past that, which I won't be surprised with this administration.
Well, the way they get past that is they kick in the door and they show you the fake warrant after, and then it's too late. And that, which is what they've been doing, by the way. They've been kicking in people's doors and showing them the ICE administrative warrant, which isn't a judicial warrant and only has limited applications. It's too late. They've kicked in your house and the gun's in your face. I'm sure Renee Good knew her rights too.
Right. That's very, very scary to understand, and how they back them as well too after they give out this violence, just fully ready to lie. So it's it's definitely going to get to a very crazy level, I think, before they realize they have to backpedal. I am optimistic in thinking that the aggression may, when it gets too high of a level, the way the media is showing it, that the aggression may be forced to dumb down. But that's just me and my wishful thinking.
We've got people calling themselves the Black Panthers carrying automatic weapons into the street to protect people in Philadelphia. Now, I've heard some things in the back channels from people who have been looking into this new Black Panther Party that are slightly concerning, but at the same time, we've reached a point where people are not really concerned so much about the legality of their response to illegal behavior in the first place.
Right.
Activists in Chicago, even before things blew up in Minneapolis, were openly describing to reporters a lawless occupation by ICE agents, and an understanding of the fact that this was not a situation where you could appeal to authority to behave themselves. You had to protect people by any means necessary. And I think people are seeing that they can't just rely on what's legal, and that they have to protect themselves and their neighbors. And I think that's very heartening.
And I think it's changing the landscape a little bit, because, similar to 2020, for whatever reason, the government's expectation is never that the people are going to do something, right? Their expectation is that everyone is going to fold and be compliant. And, Chris, as you know, like we've talked about that map 8,000 times, like the increase in police surveillance, the increase in cop cities, the increase in police department growth, all of these things were all started to build in response to what the people had done. And so now it is all about who can we push the attention to that people will be less likely to be offended by so that we can continue on our path of incarceration and building prisons and like all these things. And in the end, once again, it's all about the money. It's all about who can make the most money off of the oppression of the people who can least afford to be oppressed.
I will go so far as to say, in order to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, whose original quote is I'll mention later maybe, but everything is about money except money. Money is about power.
Yep. And one thing, when they're crashing out and they don't know what else to say, because you got to remember, these people are reactionary, racist, and they don't have an actual doctrine to fall back to. They just mentioned the George Floyd riots. They for some reason, George Floyd has been mentioned out of the mouth of white supremacists almost every single day when I see news. They feel so disrespected. They really feel that the country was lost when George Floyd riots happened. They feel the defeat on George Floyd. They always crash out and they bring him up every time when they have nothing else to say. So they are automatically showing you, even the president, he'll complain about it. You know what I mean? They'll automatically tell you how they actually feel.
But the one thing that I will say is that the American people have proven before and are about to prove again that no matter how willing they are to go to sleep when a Democrat wins, they will absolutely not take this bullshit from a Republican.
Yep.
That is the one reason that this is all at the time that it's happening. At the least, you're getting a response, because when Biden was arresting people and deporting people and traumatizing people at the borders, when Obama built the camps that was separating no one complained, right? Like
beyond not complaining, people started being apologists for ICE and the Border Patrol. I'm sure you remember the incident where the ICE folks are whipping Haitians with their reins at the border, and you get Democrats posting, "Those aren't whips."
Yeah, that was crazy. Absolutely. I was honestly shocked by that.
To be young and shocked by the things that
I will tell you what I'm shocked by. I was honestly shocked by the degree of protest all over the country in response to George Floyd. I'm old enough to remember Rodney King.
Mm-hmm.
We got riots in one city over Rodney King. We didn't get nationwide stuff. When it came to Trayvon Martin in Baltimore, Freddie Gray in Baltimore. I'm mixing up my names. That's my fault. Trayvon Martin was in Ferguson. They're killing so many people, it's hard to keep them straight.
No, Trayvon Martin was in Florida.
You're right.
Ferguson was Michael Brown.
You're right.
Listen, to try and keep track.
But when they killed Freddie Gray in Baltimore, again, we had riots in Baltimore. When they killed Michael Brown in Ferguson, we had riots in Ferguson. We finally reached the point where when they killed George Floyd, we had riots everywhere.
Even in Asia. Yep. It was crazy.
Everywhere. Asia is nice. The support, international support is nice, but riots in the U.S. are what matters.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
No, a riot in Berlin will never overthrow the U.S. government.
Even in New Haven, where I'm at, there was property damages over George Floyd,
as there should be.
Yeah.
But all the people condemning the burning down of the Target, I will never stop reminding people of this either. We're forgetting that this wasn't just people burning and looting a Target. This was people destroying the centerpiece store of an organization that goes out of its way to support the Minneapolis PD and police unions all over the country.
Yep.
How do you guys feel about the mayor?
Which one?
of Minneapolis.
Jacob Fry.
Yes.
I could do an episode about how I feel about Jacob Fry. So the thing you need to know about Minnesota politics and how this all ties together. So Renee Good was shot in the face by ICE in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is where George Floyd was killed. When George Floyd was killed and people were rioting in Minneapolis, Jacob Fry sent the cops out to kill the rioters.
Jesus.
And when the rioters started beating the crap out of the cops and burning down targets, he called Tim Walz to beg for the National Guard to protect the cops from the rioters. Tim Walz sent the National Guard to Minneapolis, and Minneapolis tried to violently repress the riots, including things like driving through black neighborhoods and spraying people's front porches with rubber bullets for no fucking reason. Tim Walz took a phone call from Donald Trump to commend him for his excellent response to maintain law and order. Now think about this when someone tries to run Tim Walz as a progressive alternative to Gavin Newsom in 2028.
Yeah. Because, I see the difference. Not the difference. I see like all the issues with this guy, like, because everybody's loving him and all this stuff. And I'm just like, he still supports the police. People.
He does. He supports
using the police to suppress protests.
He went on. What's more, he supports ICE. He went on TV and was asked point blank by a journalist, "Well, would it be legal for the Minneapolis PD to arrest ICE?" And Jacob Fry says, "Oh yeah, it would be completely legal, but we're not going to do that because they have more and bigger guns than us." Which basically is saying, so the Minneapolis police are scared, which really means, well, we don't actually care enough to protect people from ICE.
Yeah, Brendan Johnston, I feel like, is doing more than what he is doing.
And yet the reason that the National Guard is not occupying Chicago the way it has occupied other cities is because Brandon Johnson made a deal to cooperate with ICE. That's just worth noting. Is that when that was still a big deal and the National Guard was openly terrorizing D.C., which hasn't completely stopped, by the way, Brandon Johnson made a deal with the Trump administration to prevent the National Guard from being weaponized against his city by agreeing to cooperate with ICE.
That's so wild. I mean,
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I was gonna say, like, this is what happens, right? You have all these things happening behind the scenes that people are totally unaware of, and as the mainstream media and narrative focuses where it focuses, no one's paying attention to all of the other things that are happening. And so for me, one of the biggest issues that I have is, even as these conversations about ICE and what's happening, with these mass raids and everything are definitely worth like having some eyes on, it is the same media cycle. What bleeds leads. What creates chaos is what you want to talk about. What, you know what I mean? Like, this is what they do, because in reality, in the end, because I started looking this up. It's been over a year. They claimed they were going to get millions of people out within the first year, and it's less than 600,000, and a chunk of those people self-deported.
And they've deported many, many fewer people than Biden deported.
Right.
Because everything they've done has, I hate that all this cruelty is happening and that people are being killed, but they're sabotaging their own deportation machine with the way they've been just going after people and kidnapping people and disappearing them. They haven't been able to run their machine with any sort of efficiency because they don't know where people are either. Right. When they say they're losing people, in a certain, half the time they really are, because they don't care what happens to them after they're picked up.
And again, this is about the beds and the prisons and the money that Core Civic and all of these private, publicly owned, right?
And
They're
about
all on the stock exchange. Like this is
privately
that's
owned
what it's really about.
concentration camps.
Right.
In which people are dying. 25 people have died in ICE custody since the beginning of Trump's big crackdown.
Oh, wait. So it's not 30? I thought it was 30.
Oh,
What is my phone's doing something weird. Sorry about this.
no.
Did you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we have. You said you thought it was 30, and I honestly don't know the number.
It may be 30 now. The numbers that I saw last were 25, but I would believe it's 30. It may be more than 30 now. I'm willing to bet whatever numbers we hear are lower than the current numbers anytime we hear them, but that's just me being paranoid.
Well, I'm very curious to how two things, I'm very curious to how, they are going to be able to go along with this, because Kristi Noem is apparently there's an article of impeachment. I don't know how strong that is, because at the end of the day, the Democrats are not worth saving.
Well,
so
let's say all the Democrats
actually impeach her.
That's a good question, because let's even say all the Democrats vote to impeach. Great, right. The Republicans are still the House majority, so how many Republicans are going to vote to impeach Kristi Noem?
Exactly. And I have a second thing to address. Rosa DeLauro, who is the representative in my state, one of our representatives, she is under fire because her constituents is telling her that she must support to defund ICE. And she is only pro not giving them more dollars. That's what she wants to do.
And even that is skeptical, because while her supporters are denying it, she was one of two names that came up in talks to raise the ICE budget in 2026.
Yep. I was just about to say that. Yep. Which is the funny part, because she's saying one thing, but we know exactly what your true stance is.
And one of the great downfalls of politics based on aesthetics is a whole lot of people see a little old lady with pink and purple and rainbow hair and think, oh, she must be progressive.
I see her in person a lot. It's really not that glamorous. I'm sorry. It's not that glamorous.
Glamorous or not, it's not about glamour. It's this stereotype that if somebody has a funky, because you see it from both right-wingers and from these weird identitarian left-wingers who don't like a lot of what they think of as liberal aesthetics, complaining about people with green hair or blue hair or purple hair or whatever. And it's like, the fact that someone has purple hair doesn't say anything about their politics. It just says they like purple.
Exactly. I got a lot. I'm not gonna lie. I do chuckle a little bit when I see people on the right make those jokes, because I was like, oh my god, that's so funny. But they're just bad. You know what I mean? Because it's a crash out phase with white supremacy right now. They're freaking out because by 2050, half of us will be people of color, regardless of, because they're already showing in the birth rate that a lot of kids that are being born are people of color at this point in the schools. So they're freaking out. You see Elon Musk saying, "Oh, our race is going to be exterminated," and stuff like that. I'm like, no, it's not. You're in Europe. Europe is still making babies.
This is why they want. This is. I mean, I'm going to say this deliberately in the most offensive way possible. This is why the white supremacists want to give all the white girls to pedophiles, to get that birth rate up. Oh yeah.
No, I agree. Why do you see people like Nick Fuentes, who's now defending Epstein, and before that you heard Megyn Kelly talking about, oh, there's a difference between a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old. Oh well, I know child is still the same definition for both of them. Like, what are you talking about here? They're just it's so weird when they talk like this. It's very, very weird. It makes me want to smack them, but
You
I
know
try to be nonviolent.
what makes it all disgusting is there are all sorts of legitimate conversations about child liberation that need to happen that we can't have because of adult pedophiles who keep talking about the age of consent.
Right.
But that's another show too.
a whole other day long show. The whole thing is just, and of course, like that's also part of it, right? Like while everyone's talking about what's happening in the different cities and all these things, no one's talking about how many people in our government are in those lists, and there's going to be no attempt at all to deal with that, right? Like
I will go out on a limb and say, the Epstein list is I hate to say this because I'm not trying in any way to minimize pedophilia, but I think that the Epstein thing is more symptomatic of what our ruling class is like as a whole than it is about this huge scandal involving specific people in specific places. And the reason we're seeing so little action on it is not just because people are afraid of being on the list, but because lots of people want to normalize people like Epstein in the first place and are into things on their own that may have nothing to do with Epstein because this is just normal for the people who rule us.
Yeah. And you honestly don't know when you have so much wealth and capital. They can hide very well. And it's very difficult for these type of actions to be exposed.
We know that these CEOs pushing hardcore anti-drug urban policing are doing ketamine and acid in their offices more than they're working. They admit that openly.
Jesus.
So how much can they really care about people using drugs?
Yeah.
And I think I don't disagree with you at all with what you're saying, but I also think there's the other thing that's happening with these lists that's not getting talked about is how power works together, right? So while the lists are being hidden, you don't know who's working in conjunction with each other in order to continue all of the policies and systemic issues that are happening, right? Because they're all entwined. So when people are talking about, when I say like there's no difference to me between the Democrats and Republicans, and people freak out because they're like, oh my God, there's whatever madness happens in response. And I try to get people to understand that it's not that I'm saying that it doesn't feel different for people in the country who's dealing with things. For some people, it doesn't, right? For some people who live where the pothole has been the same pothole for the past 50 years, like they've seen no difference, right? But there's also a level of people who feel different depending on who's sitting in the building, right? And I acknowledge that. But in the end, the policies and practices and the things that really function to completely disable our ability to function and have nice things and do things and live and get medical care and have jobs and house, like all those things, those policies are stagnant. It's the same policies that just get renewed and regurgitated over and over and over. And so when I say to people there's no difference, it's because the livelihood of the people who are living within the structure of this place that we call the United States doesn't change based on who has control in Congress or the White House or whatever, because they're all working together and their goal is never to improve the lives and the material conditions of regular working people. That's just not the plan.
Capitalists, and by capitalists, I mean your boss and your landlord. Capitalists control the system in which we live through the means of owning the means of production. Because they own everything, nobody, whether it's us in the private sector or the government, can do anything without capital, however we get it, we can't do anything without capital. Now, the government can create capital in competition with the private sector, and state capitalism can be a powerful weapon for social democracy or for fighting against entrenched capital and trying to socialize a country. But as long as the system of liberal democracy is in place and the capitalists, through their investments, control the system, then you have what Marx called the dictatorship of capital. You have limits on what can be done. The police work for the landlord and the boss more than they work for the state itself, because the state is an extension of rules that don't exist to help you, but exist to keep things running smoothly for the landlord and the boss. Under any system where the landlord and the boss own everything, policing comes down to keeping the worker and the tenant in line by lethal force if necessary. And as a result, we invade Venezuela. Venezuelans come to America fleeing their country, and ICE kills them to prevent them from talking to Americans and building up support for Venezuela among Americans. And we say, oh, we're trying to police our borders.
And it's clearly the Bukele method, because this method has been already been in practice in not Honduras, Jesus Christ.
El Salvador. I'm going to break in on you. Not the Bukele method, the Ronald Reagan method. There is a song from the 1980s, a sort of wishy-washy liberal white dude named Noel Stookie, who happened to belong to a folk band called Peter, Paul, and Mary that was somehow still recording albums in the 1980s, read a story in the Catholic Worker about what the death squads were doing to people in El Salvador.
Yeah.
And he wrote a song about it. And the song he wrote about it applies to everything from Palestine to Venezuela, everything the U.S. government has ever done. And in very Cold War language, he says, well, just like Poland is protected by her Russian friends, the junta is assisted by Americans. And if $50 million seems like too much to spend in El Salvador, well, they say for $500 million, they could do it right. Bomb all day and burn all night till there's not a living thing upright in El Salvador. And they'll continue training troops in the USA to chase the nuns that got away. And we'll teach the military bands to play south of the border. And it's just, this applies to every fucking place we've ever been.
Yeah.
And no wonder people want to come to the U.S. The U.S. isn't bombing itself yet.
Right. Exactly. And
yet.
It's a really good point, Renee. Yeah.
I included yet in there for a reason, because let's not forget, in the West Virginia Coal Wars, Woodrow Wilson had biplanes dropping bombs on the Redneck Army. And in 1985, the Philly
I was just about to say, you don't even have to go that far back.
The Philly PD blew up a black housing co-op in Philadelphia. And even more recently than that, through what they claim was incompetence and negligence, but sounds like malicious terrorism. Just a few years ago now, the Los Angeles PD blew up a neighborhood in South Los Angeles and claimed it was an accident.
Yep.
Oh my God. And I didn't even know about that last part. I did not know. Jesus.
It was a few years ago, just after the 4th of July. They were disposing of fireworks. They loaded fireworks into an explosive truck at something like 5 times the intended maximum capacity. And then they drove to South Los Angeles, and then they blew up the fireworks in the middle of the street in a neighborhood in South Los Angeles. Now, if anybody's ever seen movies about Los Angeles, what is now called South Los Angeles is referred to in most of those movies as South Central, and it's where the black people live.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So they bombed another black neighborhood.
They
Perfect.
bombed another black neighborhood and claimed it was an accident.
And that's how you create Blythe, right? Because then you can go in and you can say, "Oh, it's Blythe.
Yes.
We have to restore," and they kick people out, and
Yes.
then they redo the land. They sell it to corporations who get to build new houses. I mean, it's such a cycle.
Yeah.
It really is such a cycle.
It really is, and this happens over and over again. You know, white people do something. White American state power does something horrible to a minority neighborhood, and then uses that as an excuse to recreate white capitalism in the space that they just destroyed. Now, this happens. We call this gentrification, whereas public space is destroyed by capitalism in order to reproduce more capitalism.
Yep.
And it's happening everywhere. It's happening in South America, where we're destroying social democracies in order to try to create right-wing dictatorships and libertarian utopias, which are dystopias for everyone but the billionaires.
Yeah,
we're destroying public spaces on the internet and creating them and replacing them with AI slop that sends money back to the corporate landlords of the internet. It's all this holistic, endless destruction of everything good to recreate something that capitalists can sell.
Yeah. I mean, here in New Haven, they had a SWAT team clear out an entire building of residents a few years ago. And now all of a sudden that building is Yale owned. All of a sudden.
Think about this, though. I mean, why the fuck does New Haven, Connecticut need a SWAT team?
I don't know why, but I tell you what,
listen. The nerds are a problem. The nerds are a problem. All right, the nerds are a problem.
Now, I've seen Revenge of the Nerds, and while lots of it does not age well and wasn't really very good at the time, there is a good message in there about the necessity for all social underdogs to show solidarity with one another.
Yeah, totally. You know, I'm a nerd.
And it is actually saying something about the history of social justice in America, even as a broadly comedic sort of thing, that the progressive black fraternity is the one that takes these guys in.
Right.
Yeah. But you know, unfortunately, like two things that I forgot to mention about versus Obama. The Black Caucus was never pro-war until Obama. They became pro-war. And then with Venezuela, we do see that there is some resistance that is still strong. I gotta give it to them on that, even though they are in a blockade now that our Navy is conducting, and they're trying to steal as much oil as they can. But there is pushback. ExxonMobil, for instance, reported that they don't want to invest anymore. The last two times it didn't work out, and ExxonMobil's not the only one. There are other companies as well too. So there is a point in this late stage capitalism where we're seeing the implosion between the rich, where they are not all on the same boat really, and they do not want to take the same risk that they have taken in the past. What does that mean for us in the working class while they are having their little infighting? I really don't know, but it's a perfect time for us to keep mobilizing. There's no other reason to not be mobilizing at all.
When the wealthy are infighting, that's a good idea to start picking them off and blame each other and blame it on infighting. I didn't say that out loud. I'm joking.
So the only thing that I'll say is, and this is I wish I could remember where exactly I heard this phrase from, but I always think of it when these larger powers are at at ends with each other is when the elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers.
Yes, that's supposedly a Kenyan
Right.
thing.
Right. But I've never been able to actually trace it
I haven't either.
definitively, right? And so, but I always think of this when these things are happening, because in the end, you know, for yes, the blockade, this current blockade is happening right now, but Venezuela's been under sanctions since 2015. Like, this is not new, right? And so what always inevitably happens is it's the people who suffer due to these decisions that are being made by these outer forces that have not, like, why on earth is the US government determining for Venezuela and Venezuelans where they can make their money, where they can trade their resources? Why? Because if Venezuela has the audacity to be selling oil to Cuba, now the Cubans actually have access to something that they're not supposed to have, because the US doesn't want the Cubanos to survive either, right? Like, it is the most absurd game of who can we cause the suffering to the most, and in how many ways can we do it?
Well, apparently one of the biggest reasons that this invasion of Venezuela happened now is because Venezuela's economy was experiencing a huge upswing because of all the oil that Russia and China were buying from them in an effort to get around the dollar, because of all the obnoxious things Biden was doing in connection with the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that also is something that we got to keep talking about, as well as podcasters and journalists and everybody that is out there in the anti-imperialist movement, no matter what you are, activists, whatever, because these are things that show that it's truthful because of how aggressive the government is going after them. You know what I mean? If Cuba was just still starving and not having any type of sense of relief, they wouldn't be talking about them at all. They only bring them up when they feel threatened by what they're doing to get out of and to combat the sanctions. Trump brought up BRICS because he don't even know what BRICS is. You know, for just be clear, he said Spain was part of BRICS and all this nonsense. I don't know if he even knows what it is, but someone told him about it and he freaked out, and that's why he would tear up crazy.
I want to bring in another reason why they want to destroy Cuba now more urgently than before, too. And it's going to bring in some of those things that some of these right-wingers and very conservative left-wingers don't really like to think about, because everything's always about economics. But one of the things white supremacists really hate is queer people. And a couple of years ago, Cuba passed this really, really, really wide-ranging constitutional amendment completely changing their national family law in a way that essentially says, if you're queer and your very religious parents are beating the shit out of you, you have every right to go choose your own parents somewhere else.
Right.
Now, imagine how our Republican Party and Trump's buddies feel about that.
Right.
Just
wasn't the Sentence X, I believe, is the name of the organization that was ran by Fidel Castro's daughter.
Yes.
For the white supremacists, that has always been a thing. It's just been put into the Constitution. It's the only difference. Like, it actually became a part of the Constitution.
But it's just amazing to me that they actually people always talk, oh, no, it's so repressive. Yeah, it's so repressive. They passed a law letting kids choose their own parents when their parents are abusing them.
Right. So oppressive. And I also like the fact that they also hide the identity of children on passports and stuff like that too. I think that's something that we should also adopt here in the States to protect children more. No, there's a lot of good things, and they don't like that. They don't like that the Cuban doctors are like some of the best doctors in the entire world.
They really didn't like that Americans were going to Cuba for lung cancer treatment.
Right. And they saved Italy during COVID. They didn't like that. I bet you they didn't like that.
Now we need to let Renee talk a little now.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm just listening and just reminding myself that this is, and I guess you just can't say it enough because you want it to drill into people. Like, this is the point, right?
Yeah.
The point is to completely destroy any opportunity for anyone to understand that there is another way, right? You don't have to believe that this capitalist structure under which we live is the only way. And so whenever I see people comparing, well, what about this and what about that? I always want to remind people, you're comparing things to a system in which you have been led to believe is the only way to live, right? You think that this capitalist structure underneath which we live is the only way to live. And so you're comparing everything to your own personal experience, your lived experience, what you think is how things are supposed to be. And as the governments of the West go around the world and say, like, well, you're doing this wrong and you're doing this wrong and you're doing this wrong, it's always about this exceptionalism, right? This idea that, like, we do it the best and we do it the right way and no one else can do things in any other way. And the minute someone else is doing something another way, they're picking it apart, looking for, well, see, look, they did this here and look at how it turned out. And no one digs deeper, because the reality is there is no perfect system, right? Like any country that you go to that survives under whatever system it's surviving under, there's always going to be problems. And I think the key to a lot of these conversations is just simply acknowledging that there are other systems that exist that work for a lot of people, right? You don't have to, this idea that this is the only way is the thing that really is such a hindrance to having real conversations. Because when people talk about Cuba and they talk about how, the people are suffering and they don't have access and the power goes out and all these things, but they somehow forget that Cuba's been under, what is it now, 76 years of sanctions and refusal to allow them resources. And yet and still, with all of that, they have the highest reading rate. They have the best medical, like all of these things, but no one talks about that part, right? We, I don't know how familiar you all are with Luna Oy, who does the translations on so we had Luna on, and she talked about like life in Vietnam.
Yes.
Right. And it was such a fascinating conversation to hear her talk about how quickly the military is sent in to build houses so that people who lost their house in a flood had somewhere to go live, right? Like, it's so, and she says it, she says, listen, Vietnam's not perfect, right? There are plenty of things that I don't like, that don't go well. But in the end, guess what? We don't have hundreds of thousands of people living on the street.
In the end, the government understands that the state's responsibility is to give society a way to care for its members. Right. There's no point in having a state otherwise. Now,
exactly.
I'm an anarchist. In the end, I want to see what Marx was talking about when he was talking about communism. No money, no state. Everybody finds some way to share everything, and we live in a society based on our needs and our freedom to work the way we want to work. But I'm also very much of the understanding that you can't just not have some sort of power organization by which to defend and expand socialism, because we saw what happened with socialism in one country in the Cold War. Ultimately, the communists got overwhelmed from every side and couldn't sustain themselves.
Yeah. Just
by sort of this long war of attrition that kept them having to fight all the time, until there were some people who are just, we want to stop fighting. We want to be able to enjoy the good things that people of our class enjoy in the West. And that, in the end, we want to stop fighting and enjoy the good things that people of our class enjoy in the West. That was what defeated the Soviet Union, and that is a fundamental problem with the state structure, with any state structure, that has to be understood and addressed. That if you are constantly struggling, then there are always going to be people who want to just stop fighting and enjoy the good stuff. And that makes it very hard. And at the same time, you can't stop struggling, because the moment you actually try to make real accommodations with capitalist power, they find ways to fuck with you.
Yep. And that's what happened to China with the one China policy. That's why that exists.
It happens. The reason that Luna isn't completely happy with everything in Vietnam, and the reason many people aren't completely happy with everything in China, is Vietnam and China were forced to liberalize portions of their economy to the West in order to not be North Korea and Cuba.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So in a place where cars were not a necessity or a big thing, suddenly cars became a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So all of these, it's all just, I've been having, and I talk about this on this show a lot. So, for people who wander over on Saturdays, sorry to be repetitive, but my constant struggle with life these days is living with the knowledge of how bad things really are, but still needing to live.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm a parent, I'm a wife, there are things that occur with it. I have friends, right? Like,
Right.
there's my biggest, I think one of my largest contradictions in life is that I still enjoy American football. I'm sorry, people, I can't, once for as much as I want to be like, I'm never watching it again, I just enjoy it too much, and there are very few things that I can find enjoyment in, so I'm holding on to these things contradictions.
I spend a lot of time on YouTube watching classic NBA videos lately, and sports videos about classic NBA.
Yeah, it's a rough space to be in, because the reality is, at every turn, I am thinking about the things that so many people don't have access to, are suffering with, are suffering under. I think about people being under bombed buildings, and think about Palestine a lot. I think about Haiti. I think about all these things constantly barraging, right?
I find these little, as I watch my sports content, I find these little things that make me feel better about my politics. Like, for instance, do you know who the longest serving president of the NBA Players Union was?
No.
Oscar Robertson.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now, what's hilarious about this is the NBA Players Union was much more militant than any other sports union before any of the other sports unions. When the NBA Players Union was founded, it was founded by Bob Cousy of the Boston Celtics and Oscar Robertson of the Cincinnati Royals and some other people, who basically got together and said, we need a union, and elected Cousy the first president. And the very first thing they started to do was fight for more equitable pay guarantees in the draft. And then when they won their pay equity fight, Cousy resigned as president and was succeeded by Tom Heinsohn, also of the Celtics, who had worked in insurance as his day job, because back in those days, all the NBA players had day jobs, because one of the reasons they needed to secure better compensation is they didn't make enough money to live completely off being an athlete, and still had to work selling insurance or whatever during the year. But the reason they made him the second union president was because of his experience with insurance companies putting together institutional health plans. He then took over the next step of the fight, which was to get them health insurance through the NBA and make their teams pay for their health care. And because he had experience in the health insurance industry, he knew how to put this plan together and what they needed to agree with. And then they brought Oscar Robertson in for the next step, which was this very, very, very long fight that was only finally won years later as part of a lawsuit that started when Robertson was still a union president, that allowed free agency. But the NBA was progressive enough to put a black man in charge of their union for the most important part of their labor struggle, and keep him in charge for as long as it took for him to get those results. And so even sports can have these surprising little bits of good news hidden into it that can be inspiring. And I know Renee has to go soon, and I know Jamarr also has limited time. So Renee, do you have any final thoughts before I close this up?
No, I mean, I want to thank you for the invite, Chris. And I know we always try to figure out, like, when can I come back and figure things out. So I'm always appreciative that you welcome me when the schedule allows, but also because in prepping for today, I found like 3 reports that I didn't know existed, and they're all like brand new reports. And so now I have something else to fall down a rabbit hole about. So, you know, I'll have to make sure that I circle back to and let you know, like, all what I discover as I finish doing all this reading, because it's
always want to know when you can make the time to join me. I want you to join me. When you can't, I still want to know what you've got to share so I can talk about it and give you a shout out.
I appreciate it. And Jamarr, I've never met you before, but this was fantastic. I'm going to go track down your channel now. And
oh, thank you. Yeah. I just finished my last season. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. It was Roku TV stuff there too, but I just finished my last season.
Awesome. So, but thank you. And, you know, listen, I tell people all the time, go read something. Go please go read something. I just finished both Perfect Victims and the Palestine Laboratory, which were both very, very eye-opening. The Palestine Laboratory, absolutely, my head top almost blew off, and it's not even a new book. So, yeah. You know, I think, you know, go read something, go find something to engage in. And, you know, as always, Chris, I really appreciate you, and Jamarr, it really was nice to be on with you. So thank you.
And thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm very familiar with your group and stuff, and I love everything that you guys do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Jamarr, do you have any final thoughts?
No, not really. No final thoughts. I have an episode with Dan Kovalik coming up soon on Friday. We're gonna rehash about everything that has happened at the beginning of this year. That's really much is going on. And then the Studio 3A episode, my second show, we are still moving, and we just recorded yesterday, so people will check out that soon. They'll be out this week as well.
Awesome. And my final thoughts are fairly simple. The late, great Occupy Wall Street founder and anthropologist who did Anarchy, David Graeber, said, remember, people made the world the way it is, which means people can make it different. On that note, I hope everybody has a great Sunday. I will be trying to put together shows for next week and the week after. I will record something if I don't get a live guest. I have lots of poetry I want to annoy people with if it comes down to that. And I have a great little mini video from one of those YouTube things I was talking about Oscar Robertson that I want to break down for people who are interested in sports and politics.
Yeah. That sounds really, really interesting to me.
and to me. And you know, listen, I'm all about it. But thanks, Chris. Good luck with everything. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, Renee. Talk to you soon, Jamarr. And I'll talk to everybody soon. And until then, we'll tweet at you.